Those shelves hold the lamps that will be lit tonight, each one a simple closed shape of pale terracotta, with a pinched spout for the wick and a small filling hole on top. The surface is smooth from the potter's hand and darkens slightly around the rim where old oil has seeped into the clay over many weeks of use. Beneath the shelves, on a sturdy workbench of oak planks worn to a soft polish by countless sleeves and hands, the tools of the lamplighter's trade are arranged in a careful line. There is a bronze pouring vessel with a long narrow spout, its body shaped like a small amphora, and its handle wrapped in thin cord to provide a firm grip even when the metal is slick with oil. Next to it lie several bundles of dried wicks, made from the pith of a marsh reed, each one cut to a standard length and tied with a single strand of flax thread to keep them together until needed. A shallow clay dish holds spare lamp caps, the small disc-shaped lids that can be placed over the filling hole to keep dust out during the day. And leaning against the corner of the workbench, reaching almost to the low ceiling, is the long lighting pole, a smooth shaft of ash wood fitted at its upper end with an iron hook and a metal taper that ends in a tiny cup to hold a flame. An older man sits on a wooden stool in the far corner of the chamber, a wax tablet resting on his knee and a bronze stylus in his hand. He is the overseer of the evening lighting, and his task is to keep the record, marking the number of lamps that go out and the number that are lit, noting any that need repair or replacement. He has been doing this work for so many years that his movements have the quality of slow water, each gesture performed with a calm economy that wastes nothing. His tunic is a faded russet color, and his sandals are of the simplest kind, leather soles held by thin straps that cross over the instep. He does not speak when you enter, because no words are needed between two people who have shared this quiet ritual many times before, the only communication being a slight nod that you return as you cross to the workbench and set down the empty carrying basket you have brought from the storage alcove. The basket is a large woven container of willow, with a flat bottom and 2 rope handles, wide enough to hold 12 lamps in a single layer with a little space between them for padding. You place it on the bench and turn to the shelves, beginning the first task of the evening, which is to select the lamps that will be carried out into the city and to check each one before it goes into the basket. The checking is a slow, methodical process that you perform by holding a lamp in both hands and rotating it in the light of the wall flame, looking for any cracks that might have developed in the clay since the last time it was used. A crack, even a hairline one, can allow oil to seep through and weaken the lamp's body, so you examine every surface with care, running a fingertip along the seams where the 2 halves of the mold were joined before firing. The clay is cool and slightly rough, like a piece of dried river bank, and when you find a lamp that is sound, you place it in the basket with the spout facing inward, so that the wick will not be damaged in transit. You inspect 12 lamps in this way, rejecting one that shows a small star-shaped fracture near the filling hole and setting it aside on a shelf reserved for broken pieces that will go back to the potter's yard for regrinding into grog. The 11 good lamps sit in the basket in 2 neat rows, their spouts all aligned, their rounded bodies catching the lamplight and showing variations in the terracotta's color that range from a pale buff to a deeper reddish brown. With the basket half full, you turn to the wicks, untying one of the flax-bound bundles and taking out the individual lengths of reed pith, which are pale and spongy, about as thick as a child's little finger. Each lamp already has an old wick inside it from the previous night, and your job is to check that these old wicks are not too short, too frayed, or clogged with carbon, trimming them where necessary and replacing any that have become too worn. You take a small bronze knife from the workbench, its blade worn thin from years of sharpening, and you lift the first lamp from the basket, holding it up so that you can see the wick extending from the spout. The trimmed end should protrude just far enough to catch a flame without smoking too much, a distance you have learned to gauge by eye rather than by any measurement. The wick in this lamp is slightly too long and blackened at the tip, so you pinch it gently between thumb and forefinger and draw it out a little further. Then slice away the darkened portion with the knife, letting the tiny clippings fall into a pottery bowl kept on the bench for this purpose. The bowl is half full of old wick trimmings, ash, and tiny shards of broken clay, a collection of the small remnants that accumulate from the lamplighter's daily work. You trim the wicks of all 11 lamps, replacing 3 that are too short to serve a full night's burning, drawing fresh lengths from the bundle and threading them carefully through the spout with the help of a thin bronze wire that has one end flattened into a tiny hook for this exact purpose. When the wicks are ready, you bring the bronze pouring vessel to the main oil storage jar that stands on the floor beside the workbench, a large amphora with a pointed base set into a wooden stand and a wide mouth covered by a fitted clay lid. The oil inside comes from olive groves in the southern provinces, shipped in heavy barrels up the river to the docks of Londinium and distributed to the city's lamp stores by the municipal contractors who supply the public lighting. This particular batch is of good quality, thick and clear with a pale golden color that catches the light like liquid amber when you tilt the jar to fill the pouring vessel. The smell that rises as the oil flows is mild and slightly grassy, with an undertone of the olive fruit itself, a scent that will become much stronger when the wicks are lit and the oil begins to warm. You fill the pouring vessel, not quite to the brim, leaving a little space so that you can carry it without spilling, and you return to the workbench where the trimmed lamps wait. Filling the lamps is a task that requires a steady hand and a patient rhythm, a pace that cannot be hurried because the oil must be added in a thin, controlled stream through the small filling hole without overflowing onto the clay or wetting the wick from the wrong direction. You lift each lamp, tilt it slightly so that the filling hole is uppermost, and bring the spout of the pouring vessel to the opening, letting the golden oil run in until the lamp is nearly full, but not quite, leaving a small airspace that will allow the oil to expand slightly as it warms. The oil settles in the body of the lamp with a faint blugging sound that is the only noise in the room apart from the soft scratch of the overseer's stylus on the wax tablet as he makes his tally marks. A sound that is so quiet it is almost absorbed by the stone walls. You fill all 11 lamps, and then, because the oil level in the pouring vessel is now lower and easier to control, you go back to each one and top it off to exactly the same level, a practice of precision that has no name but is simply how the work has always been done. With the lamps filled, you pick up the spare lamp caps and select one for each lamp, choosing discs that fit snugly over the filling holes to prevent dust or insects from getting in during the walk through the streets. The caps are simple rounds of fired clay with a small knob on top for gripping, and they sit in place with a light press of the thumb, creating a seal that is not airtight, but close enough for the hour or so it will take to complete the route. You place the capped lamps back into the carrying basket, and now the basket is heavier, the combined weight of 11 filled lamps and their clay bodies pressing down on the woven willow base, a comfortable heft that you have lifted so many times that your arms and shoulders know it as well as they know your own tunic. After the lamps, you attend to the other items you will carry tonight. A small leather pouch hangs from a peg on the wall, and you take it down and open its drawstring to check the contents. Inside are a spare piece of flint and a small iron striker, wrapped in a scrap of linen to prevent them from clinking against each other, plus a tiny bronze flask with a screw stopper that holds extra oil for topping off any lamp that may burn low before its time. You add a few spare wicks from the bundle and a second lamp cap that has a slightly larger diameter, just in case. The pouch goes over your shoulder on its long strap, and it settles against your hip with a familiar weight that you will not notice after the first few steps. The last piece of equipment is the lighting pole, which stands taller than you by a good 2 feet, its ash shaft smoothed by the oils from many hands and darkened with age to a deep honey brown. You lift it from its corner, feeling the balance point that lies a little below the middle, and you check the iron fittings at the top. The hook is a simple curve of forged iron, meant for lifting lamp handles and placing lamps onto their brackets, and it is firmly riveted to the shaft. The taper beside it is the more delicate instrument, a narrow rod with a cup at the end that holds a tuft of flax fiber soaked in oil, which will serve as a portable flame during the lighting circuit. You dip the flax tuft into a small jar of fresh oil, letting it absorb enough to burn steadily, but not so much that it will drip, and you set it in the taper's cup, ready to be lit from the wall lamp when you leave. By now the sky through the high window has moved through several stages of fading color, from the pale grey blue of your arrival to a deeper shade that is almost slate, with the first suggestion of violet gathering near the horizon where the sun has already disappeared. The overseer finishes his current line of tally marks and sets the stylus down on the wax tablet with a soft click, then stretches his fingers slowly, one by one, the way a man does when he has been holding a tool for a long time. He looks over the basket of filled lamps, at the leather pouch on your shoulder, at the pole in your hand, and he gives a single nod that means everything is in order and you are ready to begin. You lift the basket by its 2 rope handles, feeling the weight settle evenly between your arms, and you step toward the door, ducking slightly under the low lintel because the chamber was built in an older time when doorways were made smaller to conserve warmth. Outside, the street is quiet and nearly empty, the cobblestones underfoot worn smooth by the passage of carts and feet over many years, their surfaces catching the last of the daylight and holding it as a faint grey shimmer. The air has cooled, and it carries the mixed smells of the city at dusk, the dry scent of stone and the dampness rising from the river a few hundred paces to the south, along with the distant smell of cooking fires and bread ovens that have been damped down for the night. You turn to the right and walk a short distance along the inside base of the city wall, where the first lamp bracket waits, a sturdy iron arm that extends from the stonework at about the height of a man's upraised hand. The bracket is empty, its hook pointing outward into the street, and the stone behind it is stained with a faint dark patch from the smoke of many previous lamps, a mark that is repeated at every bracket along the route, like a signature written in soot. You set the basket down on the cobbles, careful to place it where no one will trip over it, and you lift one of the filled lamps from its place. The clay is still cool, the cap snug over the filling hole. You remove the cap and drop it into the pouch, then take the pole in both hands, angling the hook toward the lamp's small loop handle, a feature molded into the clay just behind the spout. The hook fits through the loop with a tiny metallic sound, and you lift the lamp from your hand, raising it on the end of the pole until it can be set gently onto the bracket's arm. The bracket holds it securely, its weight causing the arm to dip just slightly, a flex that is built into the iron by design. With the lamp in place, you now bring the taper end of the pole close to the lamp's wick, positioning it so that the oil-soaked flax tuft, which you will light from the wall lamp inside the chamber, can transfer its flame. At first you must light the taper itself, so you step back to the doorway, reach inside with the pole, and touch the tuft to the flame of the wall lamp, where it catches with a soft whump that is barely audible. The taper now holds its own small flame, a bright point that dances slightly in the evening air, and you carry it back to the first bracket, holding it steady as you bring it down to the lamp's wick. The wick catches on the first touch, the oil in the lamp warming and drawing upward through the fibers in a process that is as old as civilization. The flame starts as a small blue flicker at the very tip of the wick, then grows into a steady yellow teardrop that settles into a shape determined by the airflow around the spout and the exact length of the trimmed reed. You watch it for a few seconds, waiting to see that the flame is even and does not gutter or smoke, and when you are satisfied you lift the pole away and move on. That is the pattern, and it will repeat itself many times tonight, a slow accumulation of small flames that will mark the path through the city like a string of beads laid out on a dark cloth. The first lamp glows against the grey stone of the wall, its light a warm circle that reaches about 10 feet in every direction, just enough to show the texture of the masonry and the curve of the cobbles and the edge of the gate's shadow, and beyond that circle the dusk is settling in layers, each one a little deeper than the last, as the city prepares to sleep. You step out of the low doorway of the lighting chamber, and the first thing you notice is the air, which has changed noticeably from the still coolness inside the stone room to a moving coolness that carries the open breath of the evening. It touches your face and your bare forearms with a softness that is neither cold nor warm, but simply there, a presence that seems to gather in the folds of your tunic and the loose weave of the wool. Beneath your sandals the cobblestones feel different too, their surfaces holding a slight daytime warmth that fades even as you stand still, the leather soles of your sandals thin enough to transmit the rounded contours of each stone and the fine grit that has settled between them. You stand for a moment just outside the door, adjusting the basket in your grip, the weight of the 11 filled lamps pressing down through the willow weave into the palms of your hands. And then you begin to walk. The street follows the inside base of the city wall, a broad path of fitted stone that runs straight for a long distance before curving gently out of sight around a projecting bastion. The wall itself rises on your left. A mass of grey masonry blocks each about the length of a man's forearm, laid in even courses with a thin line of mortar between them. At this hour, the stone is the colour of a dove's wing, a soft mid-grey that will darken as the last light leaves the sky. High above, the parapet is a sharp line against the deepening blue, and you can see the gaps between the stone merlons where sentries sometimes stand, though tonight the wall walk is empty because the city is at peace and the watch does not change until the moon rises. Your right hand holds the ash pole upright so that its tip, with the little flame already burning in the taper's cup, rises well above your head, a small bright point that moves with your stride and draws a faint trail of light on the air if you turn too quickly. After perhaps 40 paces, you come to the first lamp bracket you have not yet lit. It is fixed into the stone of the wall at the exact height of your shoulder, so that when you stand beside it, the iron arm is level with your collarbone. This bracket is older than the one beside the gate, its surface darker and more pitted, with a fine patina of rust that has been polished smooth by many hands lifting lamps on and off over the years. The arm extends straight out from a back plate that is bolted into the masonry with two heavy iron pegs, and at its outer end it curls upward into a hook shape that is not quite symmetrical, as though the smith who forged it allowed the metal to flow where it wished rather than forcing it into a perfect curve. The hook is broad enough to cradle the loop handle of a standard lamp, and its tip is slightly flattened to prevent the lamp from slipping sideways in a strong wind. Beneath the bracket, the stone is stained with a vertical smear of soot that runs down for about a foot and then fades, a record of numberless flames that have risen from lamps hung here before you were born and will continue after you are old. You set the basket down on the cobbles, positioning it carefully against the wall so that no one walking past could stumble over it, though there is no one walking past at this hour. The sound the basket makes when it settles is a soft rustle of woven willow accompanied by the faint clink of the clay lamps inside shifting against each other. You straighten up and look at the bracket for a moment, not because you need to examine it, but because the pause is part of the rhythm, a small space of stillness between the walking and the doing. Then you lift one of the lamps from the basket, your fingers finding the loop handle, the clay cool and faintly textured. You remove the little clay cap from the filling hole and drop it into the pouch at your side, hearing it land softly among the other spare pieces. Holding the lamp in your left hand, you bring the pole across your body with your right, angling the iron hook toward the lamp's loop handle. The hook slides through the loop with a tiny metallic scrape that is over in an instant, and then you lift the lamp from your hand, raising it smoothly on the end of the pole until it reaches the height of the bracket. Settling the lamp onto the bracket is a motion you have performed so many times that your muscles know it without any thought from your mind. You lower the pole just enough that the lamp's loop drops over the bracket's hook, and you feel the slight transfer of weight as the iron takes the load from the ash shaft, a subtle change in the pole's balance that travels down through the wood and into your hands. The lamp now hangs securely, its spout pointing outward into the street, its rounded body resting a finger's width from the stone of the wall. You withdraw the hook with the same steady motion, leaving the lamp alone on its iron perch, and then you shift the pole in your grip, so that the taper end comes forward, the small flame still burning cleanly with a tiny flutter that is the only movement in the still air. Lighting the wick is a matter of bringing the taper down to exactly the right distance, close enough that the heat can transfer but not so close that the flame is choked. You hold the pole with both hands now, one near the middle and one near the lower end, and you guide the taper's flame to the tip of the wick that extends from the lamp's spout. The wick is pale and dry-looking, its trimmed end a tiny brush of reed fibers, and when the flame touches it there is a brief hesitation, a moment when nothing seems to happen, and then a small blue glow appears at the very tip and spreads downward into a steady golden flame. The transformation is always quiet, a silent blooming of light that pushes back the dusk in a small circle around the bracket, illuminating the grey stones, the cobbles at your feet, the texture of the wall, and the shape of your own hands on the pole. The flame settles into a shape like an almond, pointed at the top and rounded at the base, and it gives off a faint ribbon of smoke that is almost invisible against the darkening wall. You wait, counting a few slow breaths, watching to see that the flame is stable and that the wick is drawing oil properly. The oil inside the lamp warms and rises through the fibers in a continuous process, and the flame responds by growing a little taller, then settling back to its steady height. A height you know by heart, because it is the same height that a good wick always produces when the oil is fresh and the trimming has been done correctly. When you are satisfied, you lift the taper away and lower the pole, letting its base rest on the cobbles while you pick up the basket. The first lamp you lit by the gate is now behind you somewhere, and this is the second, and already the street feels a little more shaped, a little more defined, as though the lamp has given the wall a boundary that it did not possess in the flat grey light of dusk. You look up and notice that just beyond this bracket the wall is pierced by a narrow opening, the entrance to a staircase that leads up to the wall. The stairs are made of the same grey stone, each step a single block set into the inner face of the wall at a steep angle, with a wooden handrail fixed into iron brackets on the open side. The staircase begins at the level of the street and rises straight up along the inner curve of the wall for about 20 steps before turning onto a small landing that opens onto the wall walk itself. The opening is not a doorway, but a simple gap in the parapet, a slot cut through the stone that is just wide enough for one person to pass. And above it, the sky shows as a rectangle of deep blue that has already lost all trace of the sun. You do not climb the stairs tonight because your route does not go up onto the wall walk, but you pause to look at them because they are part of the pattern of your evening, a fixed point on the route that you see every night, whether you ascend or not. The stone of the steps is worn into shallow depressions in the center of each tread, worn by the feet of the sentries who have been climbing them for more than 100 years, and the depressions are smooth and slightly shiny, catching the light from the lamp you have just lit, and holding it in a way that makes the stone look polished rather than eroded. At the base of the stairs, set into the wall at ankle height, there is another lamp bracket, smaller than the one you just used, intended to light the lowest steps so that the watchmen can find their footing in the dark. This bracket is empty, and you know that it is your task to place a lamp here as well. So you set the basket down a second time and take out another lamp, one of the smaller ones you selected for such purposes. This lamp is slightly different in shape from the one you hung on the shoulder height bracket, its body more squat and its spout angled upward a little more steeply, designed to throw its light downward onto the ground rather than outward into the street. You hold it for a moment and remove the cap, then use the pole to lift it, the hook fitting the loop as neatly as before, and you settle it onto the low bracket with the same careful motion, the weight of the lamp feeling lighter, because the bracket is closer to the ground and you do not have to lift the pole as high. You bring the taper down and light this wick as well, watching the flame catch and grow, and its light falls onto the bottom step in a warm yellow pool that spills over the edge and onto the cobbles, overlapping with the light from the higher lamp, so that the whole area around the staircase glows with a soft, doubled radiance. You pause again, not out of any need, but because pausing is natural at this point in the route, a moment when the work is beginning and the night is still fresh. You look along the street, forward and back, seeing the way the darkness is settling into the distance while the small circle of light around you remains bright, and you feel the pattern of the evening beginning to establish itself in your mind, the sequence of bracket after bracket, each one requiring the same motions of lifting and hooking and lighting, each one adding its own small flame to the growing chain that will eventually stretch all the way around the inner circuit of the city. The routine is already forming, a steady rhythm of walking and stopping and walking again, and there is something in the repetition that feels like the slow turning of a wheel, each revolution identical to the last and yet carrying you a little further along the road. You pick up the basket and continue walking, the pole resting easily in your right hand, with its flame still alive and waiting. The cobblestones pass under your sandals in a steady sequence, their texture a constant low information that your feet receive and ignore, and the wall on your left continues unbroken for another 100 paces before the next bracket comes into view. When it does, you stop and repeat the pattern, hanging the lamp, lighting the wick, watching the flame settle, and then moving on. Each time the actions are the same, and each time the small variations appear without being called, the way a bracket might hold the lamp at a slightly different angle, because the iron has shifted over time, or the way a particular lamp's wick might take a little longer to catch because the reed fibers are packed a fraction more tightly. You notice these things without noting them, adjusting your hands without any conscious decision, the body knowing what the mind does not need to articulate. The street is quiet and the dusk deepens, and you move from lamp to lamp, a single figure with a pole and a basket, drawing a line of light along the base of the ancient wall. The street along the inside of the wall eventually reaches a point where the masonry turns outward at a wide angle, following the line of an older fortification that once enclosed a smaller settlement before the city grew. At this turn you leave the wall and begin to walk downhill along a gently sloping lane that leads toward the river, the cobblestones giving way after a short distance to a surface of packed earth mixed with gravel and crushed brick, a material that feels softer underfoot and makes a quieter sound when you walk, a low brushing noise rather than the sharper click of leather on stone. The lane descends between two rows of buildings that are taller than the ones near the gate, their upper stories projecting out over the street on heavy timber beams so that the gap of sky visible above you narrows to a ribbon of deepening indigo. The windows on these upper floors are shuttered for the night, their wooden panels closed and latched, and only a few thin lines of warm light show at the edges where a lamp burns inside. The air changes as you descend, becoming cooler and carrying a different set of scents, the damp mineral smell of the river mixing with the drier odors of stored grain and old timber, and the faint tang of smoke from the workshops that have now ceased their work for the day. The river itself is not yet visible, but you can feel its presence in the way the ground levels out ahead and in the quality of the air, which has a fullness to it that the higher streets lack, a sense of open space beyond the buildings that is waiting to reveal itself. Your basket hangs from your left hand with 5 lamps still inside, their combined weight making the woven handle press a line across your palm, and the lighting pole in your right hand continues to carry its small flame, the flax tuft burning steadily without any sign of guttering, despite the slight breeze that moves down the lane from the direction of the water. At the bottom of the slope, the lane opens out into a broad thoroughfare that runs parallel to the river bank, a wide street of packed earth that serves as the main route for the carts and wagons that bring goods up from the docks to the warehouses and the market. During the day this street is busy with traffic, the air full of dust and voices and the grinding of iron-rimmed wheels, but at this hour it is empty and still, the only sign of recent activity being the deep parallel ruts left in the earth by the passage of heavy carts, ruts that have baked hard during the dry weather and now run like twin channels down the center of the street. On the side nearest the river stand the granaries, A row of large wooden buildings raised up on platforms of heavy oak posts that keep their floors clear of the damp ground and the occasional floodwaters that rise in the winter months. The granaries are built of thick planks weathered to a silvery grey, their roofs of curved red tile sloping down to low eaves, and each one has a wide door at the front that is now closed and barred for the night with a heavy beam set into iron brackets. The lamp brackets along this street are different from the ones on the wall, being mounted not on stone but on tall wooden posts that stand at intervals of about 30 paces, each post as thick as a man's thigh, and set deep into the earth with stones packed around its base. The posts are old, their surfaces cracked and grooved by years of sun and rain, and at the top of each one an iron arm extends to one side, the same kind of hook that you have used many times already tonight. The first post stands at the corner where the lane meets the thoroughfare, and you stop beside it, setting the basket down on the hard earth and looking up at the bracket, which is higher than the ones on the wall, positioned above your head so that the lamp will throw its light a good distance in every direction. You lift a lamp from the basket, a larger one with a wider body that holds more oil and will burn longer through the night, and you fit the hook of the pole through its loop handle, raising it carefully until it reaches the iron arm. The motion requires you to extend your arms fully and tilt the pole to a steeper angle, and you feel the muscles in your shoulders working a little harder as you guide the lamp onto the hook, settling it into place with a small clink. Once it hangs securely, you bring the taper up to the wick, the flame at the end of the pole now at the limit of your reach, and you touch it to the reed fibers, watching the familiar blue flicker appear and then bloom into a steady yellow light. The lamp on its high post illuminates the corner of the granary, the rutted street, and the lower part of the lane you have just descended, and the light catches the grain of the wooden buildings, showing the silver grey of the old planks and the darker shadows of the nail heads and the iron hinges. You continue along the riverfront street, walking from post to post with the same slow rhythm, stopping at each one to hang a lamp and light it. The street is wide enough that the pools of light from the posts do not quite meet in the middle, leaving a strip of shadow down the center where the cart ruts run, and as you move from one post to the next, you pass through this darker band, feeling the temperature drop by a small degree and then rise again as you approach the next lamp. The flames behind you form a string of warm points that recede into the distance, and the flames ahead are still waiting to be lit, their brackets empty and dark against the deepening sky. Midway along the granary row, the street widens into a small open space where a long brick building stands at right angles to the river, its front facing the water and its side wall running along the edge of the thoroughfare. This building is a warehouse belonging to the city's grain supply, a solid structure of fired brick with a tiled roof and small windows set high in the walls, each one covered by an iron grille. At the corner of this building, fixed to the brickwork with heavy iron bolts, is a lamp bracket that serves both the street and the narrow alley that runs down the side of the warehouse toward the riverbank. The brick behind the bracket is blackened with old soot in a fan-shaped pattern that spreads upward and outward, a mark that has been there for as long as anyone can remember. You stop at this corner and set the basket down on the raised stone step at the base of the warehouse wall. There is a lamp here already, one left from the previous night that has burned out and gone cold. Its wick, a tiny blackened stub, and its oil reservoir completely empty. You lift the old lamp from the bracket with the hook of the pole, lowering it carefully and setting it on the ground beside the basket, where it will wait until you finish the circuit and can carry it back to the lighting room for cleaning and refilling. Then you take a fresh lamp from the basket, one of the last few that remain, and you hang it on the bracket, the hook finding the loop with the same quiet precision, the lamp settling against the dark fan of soot as though it has always been there. You light the wick and watch the flame establish itself, the light falling on the brick wall and the packed earth of the street and the corner of the alley that leads down to the water. While you're standing there, the flame of the taper steady in the still air, you become aware of movement further down the street, near the point where the thoroughfare slopes toward the wooden docks. The movement is slow and accompanied by a low, grinding sound, and as you watch you see two men pushing a handcart along the street in your direction, their shapes dark against the last pale glow of the sky over the river. The cart is a simple wooden platform on two large wheels, and it is loaded with a stack of empty clay amphorae that clink together as the wheels jolt over the ruts. The men are dock workers, their tunics hitched up to their knees and their arms bare, and they are talking to each other in voices so low that you cannot make out the words, only the soft rise and fall of their speech, a sound that is almost part of the evening itself. They do not stop or look at you as they pass, because a lamplighter at work is a common sight in the streets at this hour, as unremarkable as the birds settling on the rooftops or the river flowing in its channel. They continue up the street and disappear around the corner of the granary, the sound of their cart fading gradually until it is absorbed by the quiet. You turn your attention back to the lamp you have just lit, and you notice that it is sitting slightly askew on the bracket, the loop handle having caught on the hook at an angle that tilts the lamp body a few degrees to the left. This happens sometimes when the hook is worn, or when the lamp's loop is not perfectly centered, and it is a small thing. But you know that an angled lamp will burn unevenly, the oil pulling to one side and the wick drawing more from the higher level than the lower, shortening the burn time and producing more smoke. So you take the pole again and lift the lamp off the bracket, just enough to clear the hook, and then you lower it back down with a slight rotation of the wrist, feeling the loop settle into the correct position with a tiny click that is transmitted up the ash shaft to your hands. The lamp now hangs level, its oil sitting evenly in the reservoir, its spout pointing straight outward, and you bring the taper back to the wick to ensure it is still burning properly, which it is, the flame tall and steady and clean. The alley beside the warehouse is a narrow passage between the brick wall and the side of the next granary, its surface made of broken brick and gravel that crunch underfoot as you walk a few paces down it to check the small lamp that hangs on a low bracket halfway along. This lamp is there to light the path for the grain measurers, who sometimes work late during the harvest season, and tonight it too needs replacing, its oil having burned away to a sticky residue at the bottom of the clay body. You remove it and put a fresh lamp in its place, lighting the wick and watching the flame throw a narrow corridor of light between the two walls, illuminating the damp bricks and the small weeds that grow at the base of the wall where the sun never reaches. The alley smells of old mud and brick dust, and the light from the new lamp makes the space feel less like a gap between buildings and more like a proper pathway. A small transformation that is repeated all over the city, wherever your work takes you. When you return to the main street, the sky has completed its long fade, from blue to indigo to a deep violet that is almost black, and the stars are emerging in greater numbers, the brighter ones appearing first, and then the fainter ones filling in the spaces between, as your eyes adjust to the darkness. Over the river, visible now as a broad expanse of moving darkness beyond the last granary, the sky holds a faint afterglow on the horizon, a thin band of deep orange that is the last trace of the sun's passage, and this glow is reflected on the surface of the water as a shimmering line that shifts and breaks and reforms with the slow movement of the current. The river is wide here, wide enough that the far bank is only a dark line of trees and low hills, and the water itself moves with a heavy slowness, the kind of flow that belongs to a great volume of water traveling through a flat landscape full of eddies and silent swirls that show briefly on the surface and then disappear. You stand for a moment looking at the river, the pole resting against your shoulder, and the basket now nearly empty at your feet. The dock is a short distance to your left, a wooden platform extending out over the water on pilings, and its planks are dark with old moisture, the grain of the wood raised and furry where countless feet have worn away the softer parts of the timber. A single lamp burns at the end of the dock, not one of yours but one maintained by the dockmaster, and its light reflects on the water in a long wavering column of gold that stretches almost to the middle of the river. The sound of the water is a constant low presence, a combination of small lapping noises against the pilings and the deeper, almost inaudible rush of the main current. And this sound fills the air around you with a texture that is both steady and varied, a background that your ears accept and then ignore, the way they accept the sound of your own breathing. There are 3 more lampposts along this stretch of the street before the route turns away from the river and heads back into the center of the city, and you go to each one in turn, hanging the lamps and lighting them, your movements now so familiar that you could perform them in total darkness, which you almost are, because by the time you reach the last post, the only light in the world seems to be the chain of flames you have left behind you, and the small flame at the end of your pole. You hang the last lamp on the final post, a sturdy piece of oak that leans slightly toward the river as though the ground beneath it has shifted over the years, and you light the wick and watch it burn for a moment, seeing the flame reflected as a tiny point of light in the dark water beyond the dock, a second flame that wavers and dances with the movement of the surface, as though the river itself has accepted the gift of the light and is carrying it away slowly toward the sea. Then you pick up the empty basket, adjust the pole in your grip, and turn away from the water, walking back toward the center of the city where more lamps are waiting. From the riverfront, the route turns inland along a narrow opening between 2 of the granaries, a passage so tight that your shoulders nearly brush the rough sawn planks on both sides as you walk. The ground here is not paved, but covered with a deep layer of wood chips and sawdust that has been trodden down over many seasons into a springy mat, muffling your footsteps into near silence after the harder sounds of the cobbles and packed earth. The passage is short, no more than 20 paces, and it emerges into a district that feels entirely separate from the open thoroughfares you have been following, a place of small lanes and irregular courtyards where the city seems to fold in upon itself. This is the quarter of the potters and the brickmakers, a warren of workshops and drying sheds and low-built kilns that has grown up gradually over the years without any central plan, so that the lanes bend and turn according to the shapes of the individual plots and the needs of the craftsmen who work here. The air in this district carries a distinctive dryness, a fine powdery quality that comes from the clay dust that settles on every surface, the roofs and the doorsteps, and the leaves of the few stubborn weeds that manage to grow in the cracks. Even at this hour, when the workshops have been closed for some time, there is a faint earthy scent that hangs in the lanes, not unpleasant, but simply present, like the smell of a dry riverbed or a newly dug foundation. The buildings are smaller here than in the commercial streets, many of them single-story structures with walls of wattle and daub or rough brick, their roofs covered with the same red tile that the brickmakers fire in their kilns, although here the tiles are often seconds, slightly warped or discolored, giving the roof lines a softly uneven appearance that you have always found restful to look at. You pause at the mouth of the lane to let your eyes adjust after the relative openness of the riverfront. The lamplight from the last post behind you throws a weak glow that reaches only a short distance into the alley, and beyond that the way ahead is dark, the walls on either side visible only as deeper masses against the sky. You know this lane well enough to walk it without a lamp, the route memorized over many evenings, and you step forward with the basket held against your hip and the pole angled forward so that the small flame at its tip serves as a traveling point of reference, illuminating a yard of ground at a time. The lane floor is made of broken brick fragments pounded flat, and the uneven surface makes your ankles flex with each step, a small adjustment that your feet make without any thought from you. After a short distance, the lane opens into a small courtyard, a roughly triangular space formed by the meeting of 3 different lanes, and here stands the first of the lamp brackets that belong to this district. It is not an iron post or a wall-mounted arm, but a simple wooden beam that has been set horizontally between 2 buildings at the height of a door lintel, with an iron hook driven into its underside. The beam is a reused piece of ship timber, its surface still showing the marks of the adze and a faint wash of salt that has dried into pale crystals in the grain. The lamp that hangs from it, the one you lit on the previous night, has burned down to nothing, the wick a blackened curl, and the oil reservoir dry. You lift it down with the pole hook and place it in the basket, which now has room for several spent lamps among the few fresh ones that remain. You take one of those fresh lamps from the basket, a medium-sized vessel of the same pale terracotta as the others, its clay still cool from the storage room. Removing the cap, you hook the lamp and raise it to the beam, the pole extending fully above your head, and you set the loop onto the iron hook with a careful upward push until you feel the weight transfer. The lamp hangs level, because the hook on this beam is a good one, straight and unworn, and when you bring the taper to the wick, the flame catches immediately, spreading into a calm yellow teardrop that pushes the darkness back from the courtyard and reveals the details that were hidden. You see the closed door of a workshop, its wooden surface painted a faded blue that has flaked away in patches. You see a stack of unfired roof tiles arranged in a herringbone pattern against one wall, each one a pale pinkish grey. You see a wooden rack holding long clay pipes that have been set out to dry, their hollow ends facing outward like the pipes of a silent organ. And you see the beginning of the lane that leads further into the district, its walls narrowing again beyond the courtyard. You walk on, following that lane as it bends gently to the left and then straightens, and here the lamps are mounted directly onto the walls of the buildings, small iron brackets set into the daub or the brick at intervals of about 15 paces. These are the lowest brackets on your route, positioned just above the height of your waist, so that to hang a lamp you must stoop slightly and guide the pole with a downward angle. The first of these wall brackets is empty, and you repeat the motions of the work, the lifting of a fresh lamp, the removal of the cap, the hooking and the placing and the lighting, each action flowing into the next, without any gap of hesitation. The light from the lamp falls onto the lane floor and the lower portion of the opposite wall, showing the texture of the daub, the slight bulges and hollows where the wattle framework beneath has shifted over time, and the faint horizontal lines left by the builder's fingers as he smoothed the wet clay many years ago. A little further on you come to a bracket that is not empty, holding a lamp that has been lit already tonight, its flame burning low but steadily. This is one of the lamps you hung earlier in the evening, at the start of your circuit, when you entered the district from the other direction, and seeing it now tells you that you have completed a loop and are nearing the central point of the Potter's Quarter. The flame is a little shorter than it should be, the wick having burned down faster than expected, so you take the small bronze flask from the pouch at your hip, unscrew its stopper, and carefully add a trickle of oil through the filling hole, watching the level rise until it reaches the proper point. The wick drinks the fresh oil and the flame responds by growing taller, its light strengthening on the wall and the lane, and you wait until it settles before moving on. The lane now leads you into the heart of the district, where the potters' workshops cluster around a small open square that serves as a shared workspace during the day. In the center of this square stands the public fountain, a structure of carved stone that has been here for longer than most of the surrounding buildings, its surface is worn smooth by water and hands and time. The fountain consists of a square basin about the size of a large dining table, its rim made from a single piece of grey stone that has been hollowed out to a depth of perhaps 2 feet. At the back of the basin, mounted on a low pedestal, is the lion head spout, a carving of a lion's face with an open mouth through which the water flows in a steady stream. The carving is simple but careful, the mane suggested by a series of incised lines, the eyes 2 shallow depressions that seem to watch the square with a calm, unblinking gaze. The water emerges from the lion's mouth in a clear arc that falls into the basin with a soft, continuous sound, a gentle splashing that is the dominant noise in this quiet place, a sound that has been falling here through the days and the nights for as long as anyone can remember. Beside the fountain, set into a square stone post that rises from the rim of the basin, is a lamp bracket. It is not made of iron like the others, but carved from the same grey stone as the fountain itself, a projecting lug with a deep groove cut into its upper surface to hold the lamp's loop handle. The stone is darkened with age and streaked with green where moss has grown in the damper crevices, and the groove has been polished to a dull shine by the friction of countless lamp loops over the years. You approach the fountain and set the basket down on the rim of the basin, feeling the coolness of the stone through the woven willow, and you look at the lamp that hangs from the stone bracket. It is an old one, its clay body stained with dark patches where oil has seeped through tiny cracks in the glaze, and its flame is guttering, the wick almost gone. You lift it down and replace it with a fresh lamp from the basket, one of the last that you have, a lamp that feels particularly well made, its weight balanced and its loop centered perfectly. You hang it on the stone bracket with the same careful motion, the hook engaging the groove, and you light the wick, the flame catching and growing into a strong steady light that illuminates the whole fountain, the lion's face, the falling water, and the wet cobbles around the base of the basin. The light also catches the eyes of a cat that sits on a doorstep across the square, a small creature with grey fur and a white patch on its chest, its tail wrapped neatly around its front paws. The cat watches you with the calm attention that cats give to familiar things, its eyes reflecting the flame as two tiny green points. It does not move or make any sound, and after a moment it looks away, tucking its chin down onto its paws as though your presence is a known quantity that requires no further observation. You have seen this cat before, many times, always on the same doorstep at the same hour, a quiet companion that asks for nothing and gives only the small comfort of its silent presence. You stand at the fountain for a little while, not because the work requires it, but because the place invites stillness. The water flows without stopping, the sound of it washing through the square in a way that seems to clean the silence rather than break it, and the stars that have been emerging all evening are now fully visible above the roof lines, a dense scattering of lights that mirrors in its own way the chain of lamps you have been lighting on the ground. The sky is a deep indigo that is very close to black, and the rooftops of the workshops are dark shapes against it, their uneven tiles making a jagged horizon that rises and falls with the varying heights of the buildings. The air is cool and still, and the fountain water is cool too, so cool that you can feel its coldness radiating from the basin, even from where you stand a pace away. After a time you resume the work, walking from the fountain along the lane that leads back in the direction you came, checking each lamp as you go. There are 3 more wall brackets on this lane before it rejoins the main courtyard, and you stop at each one, looking at the flame, adjusting a wick here, adding a little oil there, making sure that each lamp is burning as it should. The first lamp you check is doing well, its flame tall and clean, the light falling on the daub wall in a soft oval that reaches almost to the eaves. The second lamp has developed a small flicker, a rapid fluttering of the flame that suggests a draught, and you cup your hand around the spout for a moment to see if the flame stabilizes, which it does, the draught passing and the flame settling back to its steady shape. The third lamp is the one you topped up earlier, and it is now burning perfectly, its light strong and even. You continue to the end of the lane, where it opens into the triangular courtyard that you passed through at the start of this section of the route. The lamp on the ship timber beam is burning well, and you pause there to look back along the lane you have just walked, seeing the string of lights that now marks it, each one a small warm glow that seems closer and more intimate than the lights along the riverfront or the wall, as though the narrowness of the lanes holds the light in a tighter embrace. The cat has not moved from its doorstep, and the fountain continues to pour its steady stream, the sound of it reaching you even here, a faint undertone beneath the silence of the night. You shift the basket to your other hand, the weight now very light with only 1 fresh lamp remaining, and you turn into the next lane, which will take you back toward the center of the city and the open spaces of the forum, where the lamps are larger and the brackets are set high on marble columns. But for now you are still among the small lanes of the potters, where the clay dust lies thick on every surface and the smell of fired earth hangs in the air, and where the quiet is so complete that you can hear the tiny sound of the pole's hook clicking against the handle of the last lamp as you walk, a small metallic note that marks your steps like a gentle chime. The lane from the potter's quarter widens gradually as it leaves the small workshops behind, its walls stepping back and its surface changing from broken brick to proper cobblestones that have been laid in a neat herringbone pattern, each stone a rectangle of grey granite worn to a dull polish. The change underfoot is the first sign that you are approaching the civic center of the city, the open forum where the public business of Londinium is conducted during the daylight hours, and the buildings on either side begin to reflect this shift in purpose, their fronts becoming taller and more regular, their doorways framed with dressed stone instead of rough timber, their walls constructed of carefully squared blocks rather than daub, uneven brick. The shutters on these buildings are painted in darker colors, deep greens and browns, and the roofs are tiled with new clay of a uniform red that has not yet faded to the paler tones of the older districts. The street delivers you into the forum not through a grand entrance but from a corner, a gap between two substantial buildings that suddenly opens out into a vast paved square, and the effect of this sudden openness after the enclosed lanes is always a little surprising, no matter how many times you have walked this route. The Forum of Londinium is not as large as those in the Mediterranean cities of the Empire's heartland, but it is the largest open space within the walls, a rectangle of smooth stone paving that stretches for perhaps 200 paces in length and 100 in width, surrounded on 3 sides by a covered portico, and on the 4th by the tall facade of the basilica. During the day, the forum is filled with people, merchants and magistrates and citizens going about their affairs, the stone ringing with voices and footsteps and the creak of cart wheels. But at this hour it is completely empty, the paving stretching away into the darkness like a grey lake frozen in stone. You step out onto the forum's edge and pause, the pole resting against your shoulder and the basket hanging light from your hand, with only one fresh lamp remaining inside, plus the spent lamps you have collected along the way. The flame at the tip of the pole casts a small circle of light around you that seems very modest against the scale of the open square, a tiny, warm island in a sea of shadow. Above, the sky is now fully dark, a deep blue-black that holds the stars in their thousands, and the forum paving reflects this darkness back with a faint sheen, the stone having been polished by generations of feet until it has a surface almost like dark water when seen from a distance. The silence here is different from the silence of the lanes, larger and more complete, a silence that seemed to belong to the scale of the architecture, as though the stones themselves have absorbed all the sound of the day and are now releasing only stillness. The lamps of the forum are mounted on the columns of the portico, which runs in a continuous row around 3 sides of the square. Each column is a tall cylinder of pale stone, brought from a quarry in the southern part of the province, and each one is fluted with vertical grooves that catch the lamplight and break it into stripes of light and shadow. The brackets are fixed to the inner face of each column at a height well above your head, perhaps 10 feet from the ground, so that the lamps will throw their light outward across the paving and under the roof of the walkway at the same time. The portico roof is supported on these columns and shelters, a broad paved walkway that runs behind them, its ceiling of timber beams painted a faded red, its rear wall punctuated by the doorways of small offices and record rooms that are all closed and shuttered now. You walk to the first column on the left side of the forum, your sandals making a soft sound on the paving that seems louder than it is because of the surrounding quiet. The base of the column is a square plinth of the same pale stone, and you set the basket down on this plinth, its woven base scraping gently against the dressed surface. The column itself rises smooth and cool beside you, its fluting a series of shallow curves that your fingers could trace if you reached out, though you do not, because your hands are occupied with the work. The lamp bracket on this column is an iron arm identical in design to those on the city wall, a projecting hook set into a backplate that has been mortared directly into a gap between two of the stone blocks. The bracket is empty, the previous night's lamp having been taken down by the morning lamp tender, and the stone behind it shows the usual dark smear of smoke that marks every lamp position in the city. You take the last fresh lamp from the basket, a large one with a wider body than the ones used in the lanes, designed to hold enough oil to burn through the entire night and into the early morning. The clay is smooth and still cool, and you remove the cap and place it in the pouch, then fit the hook of the pole through the lamp's loop handle. The height of the bracket means that you must extend the pole to its full reach, your arm stretching up until the muscles in your shoulders pull slightly, and you guide the lamp upward with a steady motion, watching it rise against the pale stone of the column until it reaches the iron hook. The weight transfers with a small jolt that you feel in your wrists, and you lower the pole just enough to ensure the lamp is seated properly, its loop centered on the hook, its spout pointing outward across the forum. Then you bring the taper to the wick, the flame at the end of the pole, now at the very limit of your reach, and you touch it to the reed fibers with the same gentle precision that you have used all evening. The wick catches and the flame grows, a tall, bright flame that seems to reach toward the underside of the portico roof, its light spilling outward in a wide arc that illuminates the column, the paving around its base, the edge of the roof, and the first few feet of the open square beyond. The flame reflects on the polished stone of the paving as a faint golden smear, and the shadows it throws are long and soft, stretching away from the column at a low angle. You lower the pole and step back, looking up at the lamp, and you see that it is burning well, its flame steady and its light already beginning to warm the pale stone to a honey color that will deepen as the night goes on. You move to the next column, which stands about 12 paces from the first, and here the bracket holds an old lamp that has burned out. You lift it down and replace it, though you have no more fresh lamps in the basket, so you must use one of the spent lamps that still has a little oil in its reservoir and a wick long enough to burn for a few more hours. This is a common practice, the recycling of lamps that are not fully exhausted, and it is a matter of selecting the right one, a lamp that has enough oil and a wick in good condition. You find one in the basket, a lamp that you removed from the low bracket in the potter's lane, and you test it by tilting it slightly to see the oil level, which is still a third full. The wick is a little short, but serviceable, and you hang it on the bracket and light it, watching the flame establish itself, smaller than the fresh lamp, but still bright enough to serve its purpose. You continue along the portico, moving from column to column, checking each lamp that is already lit, and replacing or relighting those that have gone out. The work here is different from the work in the lanes, because of the scale of the architecture and the quality of the silence, which seems to amplify every small sound, the click of the hook, the whisper of the flame, the soft fall of your sandals on the stone. The columns file past you one by one, each one identical in form but slightly different in the details of its wear. A chip in the stone here, a deeper shadow of soot there. And as you light the lamps, the portico gradually fills with a warm glow that pushes back the darkness and reveals the painted ceiling and the closed doors of the offices and the carved stone cornice that runs along the top of the rear wall. At the end of the portico you reach the corner of the forum and turn, following the covered walkway around the angle of the square. The next side of the forum is shorter, and halfway along it stands the basilica, the largest building in the city, its facade a tall wall of dressed stone that rises well above the height of the portico roof. The basilica is where the magistrates sit and the merchants negotiate their contracts, and the public records are kept, a place of voices and documents and the constant shuffle of sandals on marble floors. At night it is empty, its great wooden doors closed and barred, its high windows dark. The steps that lead up to the entrance are a broad flight of stone treads that extend across the full width of the facade, and on either side of these steps, mounted on tall stone posts, are two large lamp brackets that hold the biggest lamps on your route. These lamps are different from the standard ones, their bodies wider and deeper, their spouts large enough to hold two wicks side by side, their oil capacity sufficient for a full night and well into the next day. They are made of a heavier clay, almost a stoneware, fired at a higher temperature to withstand the greater heat of the double flame, and their surfaces are a dark reddish-brown that looks almost black in the lamplight. The brackets are not iron hooks, but bronze cradles, shaped to hold the lamps securely against the wind that sometimes funnels through the forum from the river, and the stone posts on which they are mounted are carved with simple mouldings at the top and bottom, the work of a mason who took pride in even the smallest details. You approach the basilica steps and set the basket down at the base of the left-hand post, looking up at the lamp that hangs there. It is still burning, its double flames tall and strong, the two wicks drawing oil evenly from the deep reservoir, and you can see that someone must have topped it up during the day, because the oil level is still high. You check the right-hand lamp as well, and it too is burning well, its bronze cradle gleaming faintly in the light of its own flames. These lamps will burn until dawn without any further attention, and you pause for a moment at the top of the steps, looking out across the forum from this elevated position. The view from the basilica steps is the best in the city at this hour. The entire forum stretches before you, its paving now dotted with the circles of light from the portico lamps, each one a warm pool that overlaps slightly with its neighbors to create a continuous wash of illumination along the edges of the square, while the center remains in deeper shadow. The columns of the portico stand like a row of pale sentinels, their fluting catching the light and breaking it into vertical stripes, and beyond them the dark masses of the surrounding buildings rise against the star-filled sky. The city is quiet, so quiet that you can hear the faint trickle of the fountain in the Potter's Quarter, a sound that carries across the open space and reaches you here as a distant murmur that is more felt than heard. The air is cool and still, and the stars overhead are very bright, the Milky Way visible as a pale band that stretches from horizon to horizon, a river of light that mirrors in the heavens the dark river that flows beyond the granaries. You stand there for a short time, the pole resting against your shoulder and your hands loose at your sides, and you feel the weight of the evening's work settling into your bones, not as tiredness, but as a quiet satisfaction, the knowledge that the lamps are lit and the city is held in its net of light. The forum is a place of great activity during the day, but now it belongs to you and to the silence and to the stars, a vast empty room whose walls are the buildings of the city and whose ceiling is the sky itself. You breathe the cool air and let your gaze travel slowly across the square, tracing the line of the portico, the dark openings of the side streets, the pale steps beneath your feet, and the steady flames of the two great lamps on their stone posts. Then you pick up the basket, now empty of fresh lamps, but heavy with the spent ones you have collected, and you descend the steps, your sandals making a slow measured sound on the stone, a sound that echoes softly in the silence of the forum, and then fades as you walk back across the paving toward the lane that will lead you to the next part of the route. The lane that leaves the forum does so through an archway set into the corner of the portico, a modest opening compared to the grand spaces you have just crossed, its keystone barely higher than the top of your head, and its sides built of the same pale stone as the columns. Passing through it feels like stepping from one world into another, from the civic order of the basilica and the broad paving to a part of the city that has grown organically over many generations, its streets following the paths that feet have chosen, rather than the lines that surveyors have drawn. The cobbles underfoot become smaller and more irregular, the sort of stones that were gathered from riverbeds rather than quarried and dressed, their surfaces smooth and rounded and set into the earth, with gaps between them where tufts of grass sometimes grow in the wetter months. The buildings press closer together here, their upper stories leaning toward each other across the street in a way that makes the sky a mere ribbon overhead, a dark strip studded with stars that seems very far away. You walk along this street for perhaps 50 paces, the basket bumping gently against your thigh with each step, the pole angled forward so that its flame illuminates the way ahead. The spent lamps in the basket clink softly together, a sound you have grown so used to over the evening that it has become part of the rhythm of your movement, as regular as your breathing. The street makes a shallow bend to the right and then straightens, and ahead of you an intersection appears, a place where two streets cross at an angle that is not quite square, forming a small open space shaped like a distorted diamond. This is the crossroads where your route pauses for a moment, a place that has been a landmark in the city for longer than anyone can say. In the center of the crossroads, or rather at its northern corner where the two streets meet at the narrowest point, there is a small roadside shrine. It is not a temple or a public altar of the sort that stands in the forum, but a private offering place built into the wall of a house, a niche about the size of a household cupboard that has been hollowed out of the masonry and lined with small terracotta tiles. The niche is arched at the top, the tiles forming a simple curve that frames the space within, and at its back a small stone shelf holds a carved figure about the height of your forearm. The figure is a household deity, a guardian spirit of the neighborhood, its features softened by years of weather and the touch of many hands, its stone body draped in a simple garment that falls in straight lines from the shoulders to the feet. Someone has placed a garland of dried flowers around the figure's neck, the petals faded to a pale brown that is almost the same color as the stone itself, and at the figure's feet there are small offerings, a few bronze coins, green with age, and a pottery cup that holds a residue of dried wine. Below the niche, mounted on a small iron stand that has been driven into the mortar between two stones, is a lamp bracket. It is the smallest bracket on your route, a delicate thing made of thin iron that has been bent into a graceful curve, almost like the stem of a plant, and at its tip a tiny hook holds a lamp that is proportioned to match, a miniature vessel no larger than a child's fist. This little lamp is meant to burn through the night as a mark of respect to the guardian spirit, and as a comfort to anyone who passes this way in the dark, a small point of light that says the crossroads is watched over and the way is safe. The lamp that hangs there now has long since burned out, its oil exhausted and its wick a blackened thread, and you lift it down with the pole and place it in the basket, where it rests among the other spent lamps like the smallest egg in a nest. You have no fresh lamps left in the basket, but you have several that still hold oil, and you select one that you took from the wall bracket in the potter's lane, a lamp whose clay is still faintly warm from its earlier burning. Its wick is good, and its oil level is more than halfway, enough to last the rest of the night in this small and sheltered spot. You fit the hook of the pole through the lamp's loop and raise it to the bracket, the motion careful and slow because the bracket is delicate, and you do not want to bend its slender stem. The lamp settles onto the hook with a tiny sound, and you bring the taper to the wick, the flame catching at once and growing into a small bright point that illuminates the interior of the niche with a soft golden light. The carved figure seems to emerge from the shadows, its features gentle and still, and the dried garland around its neck glows with a warmth that almost restores its color. The offerings at its feet catch the light as well, the bronze coins gleaming faintly and the pottery cup throwing a small curved shadow against the back of the niche. You take an extra moment here to position the lamp just so, adjusting its angle by a fraction so that the flame does not touch the edge of the niche and the light falls evenly across the figure. This is not a requirement of the work, but something you choose to do, a small gesture that has no name and is seen by no one except perhaps the spirit itself, a quiet acknowledgement of the place and its meaning. When you are satisfied, you step back, and the flame continues to burn, a tiny sun in its miniature universe. Opposite the shrine, on the other side of the crossroads, stands an old oak post. It is not a lamp post of the sort you've been using along the riverfront, but a much older thing, a remnant of the first wooden fortifications that were raised on this spot when Londinium was only a military outpost on the edge of the known world, a frontier settlement built by soldiers who needed a wall and a ditch and a safe place to sleep. The wooden walls are long gone now, replaced by stone, but this post remains, perhaps because it was too deeply set to be easily removed, or perhaps because someone long ago decided that it should stay as a marker of the city's origins. The oak is dark with age and weathered to a silver-grey surface that is smooth as polished bone in some places and deeply cracked in others, the cracks following the grain of the wood in long vertical lines that run from the top of the post to its base. The post is as thick as a man's body at its widest point, tapering slightly toward the top where it has been cut flat, and at its upper end someone has fixed a dual lantern holder, an iron frame with two arms that extend on opposite sides, each one ending in a hook. This holder is newer than the post, the work of a more recent smith, but it has been there long enough that the iron has rusted to a dark brown and the oak around its base has worn a shallow groove. The two lanterns on this holder are of a type you have not used tonight, lanterns with horn panes instead of the open spout of the standard lamp. They are meant for places where the wind can be strong, the horn protecting the flame from gusts that might blow it out, and the crossroads is such a place, open on all four sides to the movement of air that flows through the streets. The horn panes are thin translucent sheets, scraped from cattle horn and shaped into rectangles that fit into the iron frame, and their surfaces are clouded with age and the residue of old smoke, so that the light they give is softer and more diffuse than the sharp flame of an open lamp. One of the lanterns is still burning, its flame a low orange glow behind the cloudy horn, but the other has gone out, its wick spent and its oil gone. You remove the dead lantern from its hook, lowering it carefully because the horn panes are fragile and can crack if jarred, and you set it on the ground beside the post. Then you find a lamp in the basket that still has oil, one of the medium-sized ones with a sturdy body and a wick that has not burned down too far. The lamp is not a horn lantern, but it will serve for the night, the crossroad being sheltered enough by the surrounding buildings that the wind is not strong at this hour. You hang the lamp on the empty hook and light it, the flame rising up beside its twin on the opposite side, and together they cast a light that reaches across the crossroads and touches the walls of the houses on all four corners. The light catches the surface of the old oak post, showing the silver grey of the ancient wood and the dark lines of the cracks, the rusted iron of the holder, and the small weeds that grow around the base where the earth has never been paved. The post has stood here for so long that it has become part of the landscape, as much a part of the crossroads as the shrine itself, and you always felt that the two belonged together, the shrine and the post, the stone and the wood, the spirit and the tree, two guardians of the crossing that watch over the comings and goings of the neighborhood. While you are standing by the post, the scent of evening bread reaches you, a warm, yeasty smell that comes from somewhere behind the houses to your right, where a baker is preparing the dough for the next day's loaves. The smell is faint but distinct, drifting through the shuttered windows and the narrow gaps between the buildings, and it mingles with the cool night air and the faint, oily scent of the lamps and the dry smell of the old oak wood. It is a comforting smell, a smell that speaks of ordinary life continuing in the darkness, of hands kneading dough and fires banked in ovens, and the simple rhythms of the household. You stand still for a moment, letting the smell wash over you, and you hear another sound from the same direction, the soft thump of the wooden shutter being closed on an upper floor, the sound of someone preparing for sleep. The shutter settles into its frame with a final click, and then the silence returns, deeper than before. The crossroads is now fully lit, the shrine glowing on one side and the oak post shining on the other, their two lights facing each other across the open space like old friends who do not need to speak. The paving of the crossroads is a patchwork of different materials where the four streets meet, cobbles here and packed earth there, and a single flat stone that might once have been a doorstep, and the lamplight falls on all of it with a gentle evenness that smooths out the differences and makes the whole space feel unified and calm. You pick up the basket, which is now heavy with spent lamps and contains not a single fresh one, and you pick up the dead lantern from the ground, hooking it onto the side of the basket with a loop of cord you keep for that purpose. The work at this part of the route is done. The shrine is tended, the old post is lit, and the crossroads will be safe through the night for anyone who passes, though at this hour it is likely that no one will, the streets belonging now to the quiet and to the creatures that move through the dark without a sound. You turn into the street that leads north from the crossroads, a lane that rises gently uphill toward the residential courts where the larger houses stand behind their own walls. The street is narrow but straight, and the cobbles underfoot are worn into shallow channels where the rainwater runs in the wet season, channels that are dry now and filled with fine dust. The buildings on either side are houses, their ground floors blank with shuttered windows, their upper floors dark except for an occasional thin line of light at a shutter's edge. The lamplight from the crossroads fades behind you as you walk, and the flame at the tip of your pole becomes once again your only illumination, a small bright companion that bobs gently with your stride and casts a dancing shadow on the walls to your left and right. The rhythm of walking and lighting has become so steady now, so deeply settled into your body, that it feels less like work and more like a natural function, like the beating of your own heart or the slow expansion and contraction of your lungs in the cool night air. The street that rises from the crossroads carries you upward at a gentle incline, a slope so gradual that you notice it more in the slight extra effort in your calves than in any visible change ahead. The lane is straight for a distance of perhaps 60 paces, and then it makes a dogleg turn to the left around the corner of a large house that projects into the right-of-way. A house so old that the street has been forced to accommodate it rather than the other way around. Beyond this turn, the character of the neighborhood changes again, the buildings becoming larger and more self-contained, each one a courtyard house that presents a blank wall to the street, with only a single door and a few high windows to show that people live within. These are the homes of merchants and minor officials, families who have done well enough to afford a private courtyard and a garden of a few square paces, and their walls are built of dressed stone or good brick, their surfaces rendered with a pale lime wash that glows faintly in the lamplight. The street here is quieter even than the lanes you have been walking, quieter because there are no workshops and no public fountains and no crossroads, only the long whitewashed walls and the closed doors and the high windows with their wooden shutters all drawn. Your footsteps are the only sound, the soft brush of your sandals on the cobbles, and the occasional click of the pole's iron fittings as you shift your grit. The basket is heavy now with spent lamps, the willow handles cutting a little deeper into your palm, and you know that soon you will have to return to the lighting room to empty it, but there are still lamps ahead that need attention before the circuit is complete. The first bracket in this district is fixed to the wall of a corner house, a sturdy iron arm that has been painted with red lead at some point in its history, though the paint has mostly worn away, leaving only traces of the color in the crevices. The lamp that hangs from it is burning, but its flame is low and smoky, the wick having become clogged with a hard knob of carbon at its tip. You set the basket down and reach up with the pole, not to lift the lamp, but to snuff it briefly with the small brass snuffer that hangs from a chain on your belt, a tool shaped like a tiny extinguisher that you use only when a wick needs trimming while hot. With the flame out and the lamp still hanging, you take a thin bronze pick from the pouch and use the pole to bring it up to the wick, breaking away the carbon knob with a gentle scraping motion that sends a few tiny sparks drifting down through the dark. Then you bring the taper back to the wick and relight it, the flame now burning clean and tall, the smoke gone and the light restored to its proper brightness. Further along, the street is punctuated by a stepped alley that branches off to the right, a narrow pedestrian way that climbs the slope more steeply than the main street, its course marked by a flight of shallow stone steps that rise between two high walls. This alley is an ancient shortcut, older than the houses that now enclose it, and its steps have been worn into deep hollows by the passage of countless feet over the years. The stone polished to a dark shine that catches the lamplight as though it were wet. The lamps in the stepped alley are spaced closely together, one every 8 or 10 steps, because the uneven footing makes the route treacherous in the dark, and the residents have long insisted that it be well lit. The brackets here are small iron hooks driven directly into the mortar joints of the walls, and the lamps are correspondingly small, their bodies no larger than a drinking cup, their oil reservoirs just sufficient for a single night's burning. You enter the alley and begin to climb, the steps rising before you in a series of shadows and patches of light. The first lamp on the right-hand wall has gone out completely, its oil used up and its wick a dry black stub, and you replace it with one of the small lamps from the basket, a lamp that you had removed earlier from a bracket near the fountain and that still holds a good amount of oil. The hook is low at about the height of your chest, and you can hang the lamp without extending the pole fully, a small economy of movement that your arms welcome. You light the wick and the flame springs up at once, illuminating the step below and the step above and the moss that grows in the angle between the wall and the tread, a dark green cushion that has spread there over many damp winters. You climb further, checking each lamp as you go. The second lamp is burning well, its flame steady inside its small glass chimney, a rare feature that someone has paid extra to have installed. The glass is a cylinder of pale green, slightly bubbled and uneven, the work of a glassmaker in the northern part of the province, and it protects the flame from the draughts that sometimes funnel down the alley when the wind is from the east. The third lamp is guttering, its wick too short, and you replace it with another of the small lamps from the basket. The fourth lamp is fine. The fifth is fine. The sixth has slipped on its hook and hangs at an angle that would spill oil if it were more full, so you straighten it with a nudge of the pole and watch the flame adjust to the new level. As you climb, a gentle mist begins to gather near the ground, a low haze that forms in the evening when the day's warmth rises from the earth and meets the cooler air above. The mist is thin, no more than a foot deep, and it swirls slowly around the steps and around your ankles, catching the lamplight and diffusing it into a soft glow that makes the alley seem to float in a sea of pale gold. The mist carries a faint, earthy smell, the scent of damp stone and wet moss and the soil of the small gardens that lie behind the walls on either side, and it cools your ankles as you walk, a sensation that is not unpleasant but simply different, another texture in the varied fabric of the night. At the top of the stepped alley, the path levels out and opens into a small residential court, a cul-de-sac formed by the walls of 4 large houses that face inward onto a shared open space. The court is paved with large stone slabs, their surfaces flat and even, and in the center there is a small planted area with a single fig tree that has been trained against a wooden trellis. The tree is old, its trunk gnarled and its branches spreading wide, and its leaves are dark shapes against the starry sky. Beneath the tree, a stone bench offers a place to sit, and around the perimeter of the court, the walls of the houses are punctuated by doors that are painted in different colors, a dark blue, a deep green, a faded red, and a brown that is almost black in the lamplight. The lamp brackets in the court are mounted on the walls beside each door, and 2 of them are empty, their lamps having burned out earlier in the night. You cross to the first door, the one painted dark blue, and you see that the family who lives here has left their sandals outside, arranged neatly on a small wooden rack that stands beside the doorstep. There are 5 pairs, 2 large and 3 small, the leather worn and shaped by the feet that use them, the straps coiled loosely over the wooden pegs. The sandals are a quiet sign of the household within. The parents and the children all asleep now, their day's walking done and their feet bare on the woven mats of the interior rooms. You look at the sandals for a moment, and then you turn to the lamp bracket, taking one of the remaining spent but usable lamps from the basket and hanging it on the hook, lighting it with the taper and watching the flame throw its light across the blue door and the little rack of shoes. At the second door, the green one, the bracket is empty and the doorstep is bare, no sandals left out, the family perhaps all away or perhaps simply tidier than their neighbors. You hang a lamp here as well, using another of the lamps that still has oil, and you light it and check that the flame is steady. The light from the 2 new lamps joins the light from the others around the court, and the whole space fills with a soft, even glow that reaches the fig tree in the center and the stone bench and the trellis and the walls, making the court feel like a small private world, complete unto itself. You stand in the center of the court for a moment beside the fig tree, and you take the bronze flask from your pouch to top up the oil in a lamp on the wall near the red door, a lamp that is burning well, but whose oil level is lower than you would like. The flask is cold in your hand, the metal having absorbed the night air, and the oil inside is thick and golden and pours slowly, a thin stream that you direct into the filling hole with the care of long practice. The lamp accepts the oil without fuss, the flame dipping slightly as the cool liquid enters and then rising again as the oil warms, and you screw the stopper back onto the flask and return it to the pouch. The mist that you saw in the stepped alley has followed you up to the court, gathering in a thin layer across the stone paving and around the base of the fig tree, and the lamplight diffuses through it to create a low golden haze that makes the court seem to float in a soft and luminous cloud. The stars above are still visible, but they seem more distant now, as though the mist has placed a thin veil between the earth and the sky, a veil that catches the light and holds it close to the ground where it belongs. The court is completely silent, the houses dark and still, and you feel that you are the only person awake in this part of the city, the only one moving through the quiet streets, while everyone else sleeps behind their painted doors. You pick up the basket and leave the court by the narrow passage that leads out the other side, a passage that slopes gently downward now, carrying you away from the stepped alley and toward the northern edge of the city, where the defensive ditch runs along the inside of the wall. The mist thins as you descend, and the cobbles become visible again, their surfaces dry and dusty after the dampness of the court. The spent lamps in the basket are heavy, but the work is almost done, and you walk with the slow, steady pace of someone who has been on his feet for hours and whose body has settled into the rhythm of the night, a rhythm as steady as the tides or the stars or the slow turning of the earth itself. The passage from the residential court leads you downward at a slight angle, the walls on either side gradually lowering as you leave the large courtyard houses behind and approach the open ground that runs along the inside of the northern defensive ditch. The cobbles underfoot give way first to gravel and then to a path of trodden earth that is slightly damp from the evening mist, a surface that yields softly to your sandals and makes no sound at all. The air here is different again, cooler than in the sheltered court, and carrying a fresh green scent of grass and wet soil, and the particular clean smell of open ground that has not been built upon, a smell that reminds you of the countryside beyond the walls, even though you are still within them. The northern ditch is not a natural feature, but a military earthwork, a wide trench dug when the first walls were raised, and then deepened and reshaped over the years as the city grew. It runs in a long straight line along the inside base of the wall, its bottom lined with gravel, and its sides sloped at an angle that was once steep, but has since softened with time and weather. During the wet months, the ditch carries a shallow stream of rainwater that drains toward the river, but now in the dry season it is merely a depression in the landscape, its bottom covered with coarse grass and small wild flowers that have seeded themselves from the meadows outside. The white and yellow blooms closed for the night into tight little buds. The inner slope of the ditch rises gently to meet the path you are walking, and the outer slope rises more steeply to the base of the city wall, which looms above as a dark mass against the stars. Along the edge of this path, At regular intervals of perhaps 25 paces stand low wooden posts that serve as lamp holders for this stretch of the route. These posts are not like the tall oak timbers of the riverfront or the carved stone columns of the Forum, but simple rounds of pine about the height of your waist, their tops cut flat and their bases set into the earth with no stone packing, just the grip of the soil itself. Each post has an iron bracket bolted to its top, a simple L-shaped arm that extends toward the path, and from each bracket a lamp hangs at a height that is easy to reach, the lowest lamps on the entire circuit. The posts lean at various angles, some straight and some tilted a few degrees to the left or right, because the ground here is soft and the frost heave of many winters has shifted them over the years, but the brackets have been adjusted to compensate so that the lamps hang level regardless of the post's inclination. You walk along the path, the grassy verge brushing against your ankles with a soft whispering sound, and you come to the first of these low posts. The lamp that hangs from it has gone out, not from lack of oil, but from a wick that has drowned, its tip saturated and unable to hold a flame because someone overfilled the reservoir earlier in the day. You lift the lamp from the bracket and tip it slightly, pouring out a small amount of oil onto the grass at the side of the path, a golden stream that disappears into the dark earth and leaves a faint slick on the blades. Then you take the bronze pick and draw the wick out a little further, trimming the sodden tip with a small knife from the pouch until you reach dry fibers beneath. The lamp goes back onto its bracket, and you bring the taper to the new wick tip, watching the flame catch and grow, a little unsteady at first, and then settling into its proper shape. The light from this low lamp spreads outward across the grass and the path and the near slope of the ditch, and it catches the white petals of the closed wild flowers, making them glow like small stars scattered in the dark. You continue along the ditch path, stopping at each post. The second lamp is burning well, its oil level high and its flame tall. The third lamp has been knocked askew by a bird perhaps, and you straighten it with a gentle touch of the pole, the lamp settling back onto its hook with a soft click. The fourth lamp is fine, its light falling on a patch of gravel where the path curves slightly to follow the line of the ditch. The fifth lamp is empty, its oil completely gone and its wick a dry black thread, and you replace it with one of the last usable lamps from the basket, a lamp that still holds a third of its oil and whose wick is fresh enough to burn for several more hours. As you work your way along the path, the northern wall rises on your left like a cliff of shadow, its stone blocks distinct only where the lamplight catches the edges and the mortar lines. The wall is older here than in other parts of the city, built in the first years of Londinium's existence, when the settlement was no more than a fort and a few streets of traders' huts, and the stone shows its age in the pitting of its surface and the way the mortar has crumbled in places, leaving small gaps where weeds have taken root. The sentry walk on top of the wall is dark and empty, the watch concentrated at the gates rather than along the long stretches of curtain wall where nothing ever happens. The silence along the ditch is very deep, deeper than anywhere else you've walked tonight, because there are no houses nearby and no workshops and no fountains, only the grass and the ditch and the wall and the sky. About halfway along the ditch path, where the ground rises slightly to form a low mound that gives a view back toward the center of the city, you come upon the watchman. He is an older man, perhaps 60 winters, and he sits on the wooden stool that he has placed on the flat top of the mound, his back against a post that is not a lamp post but a marker of some kind. its surface carved with old letters that have been worn almost illegible by the weather. The watchman wears a heavy cloak of dark wool, its hood thrown back to reveal a head of grey hair cut short in the military style, and his feet are shod in thick boots rather than sandals, boots that have seen many miles of walking. Beside him, on a small iron stand, a bronze brazier burns with a low red glow, the charcoal inside reduced to a bed of embers that gives off a gentle heat and the faintest scent of wood smoke. The watchman's face is illuminated by this glow, the lines around his eyes and mouth deep and calm, the face of a man who has spent many nights sitting alone in the quiet and has made his peace with it. He looks up as you approach, not with any alarm, but with the slow recognition of someone who has seen you many times before, and he gives a small nod that moves his head barely an inch. You return the nod with the same economy, and no words are spoken because no words are needed. The watchman's task is not to guard the wall or to patrol the ditch, but simply to be present, to sit through the hours of darkness and keep an eye on the open ground between the city and the wall, a ground that is empty of anything but grass and shadows and the occasional fox slipping through the dark. He has been doing this for as long as anyone can remember, and his presence is as much a part of the night as the lamps themselves. You walk to the lamp post that stands beside the watchman's mound, the last post on this stretch before the path turns and begins to lead back toward the center. The lamp on this post is burning, and you check it, topping up the oil with a small pour from the bronze flask, the stream catching the light of the brazier as it falls into the filling hole. The watchman watches you with his calm eyes, his hands resting on his knees, and when you are done, he gives another small nod, a gesture that might mean thank you, or might mean nothing at all, except the acknowledgement of one night worker to another. The warmth from the brazier reaches you as you stand there, a gentle heat that feels good on your hands and your face after the coolness of the ditch path, and you pause for a moment to enjoy it, the pole resting against your shoulder and the basket at your feet. The view from the mound is unexpectedly wide. Looking back toward the center of the city, you can see the lights you have lit all evening, a scattered constellation of warm points that mark the streets and the lanes and the forum and the riverfront, each one a small testament to the work of your hands. The basilica is visible as a dark bulk with two brighter points at its steps, and the portico of the forum is a line of softer glows that trace the edge of the square. Further off, the granaries by the river show as a cluster of lights near the water, and the wall near the western gate has its own chain of flames that you lit at the very start of the circuit. The city is not dark anymore, but lit in the way that a city should be lit at night, not with the harsh brightness of day, but with a gentle net of small flames that hold the darkness at a comfortable distance and make the streets safe for anyone who might be walking. You leave the watchman to his vigil and continue along the path, the next lamp-post appearing out of the darkness with its bracket empty and waiting. You hang a lamp and light it, the flame joining its neighbor behind you and its neighbor ahead, a chain of light that follows the curve of the ditch all the way to the point where the path turns south and begins to lead back into the streets. The grass on the inner slope of the ditch is damp with dew now, and the lamplight catches the droplets and makes them sparkle like tiny glass beads, a field of miniature reflections that stretches all the way down to the bottom of the depression. A slight breeze moves along the ditch, just enough to make the flames flutter briefly and then steady again, and it carries the cool scent of the open country beyond the wall, the smell of meadows and distant woods, and the great dark expanse of the island that stretches northward for many days' travel. Your hands move through the familiar actions without any need for direction. The pole lifting and lowering, the hook engaging, the taper touching the wick, the flame blooming, and your mind is free to drift as it will, wandering through the quiet streets of the city and the memories of other nights just like this one. The routine is so deeply ingrained that it has become a form of rest in itself, a moving meditation that carries you forward step by step through the darkness. Each lamp a small accomplishment that asks for nothing but your presence and your care. The last lamp on the ditch path stands where the ground begins to rise again, and the grass gives way to gravel, and the first buildings of the city reappear, their walls pale in the starlight. You hang the final lamp on this stretch, a lamp that you have kept back from the basket because it still has a good amount of oil and a wick that will burn until morning, and you light it with a sense of quiet completion. The flame catches and holds, and the light falls on the corner of a weaver's workshop that marks the boundary between the open ground and the built streets. Its walls of brick and timber, its shutter closed, its signboard creaking faintly on its iron hinges. The ditch is behind you now, the lamps along its edge a string of warm points that will burn through the night and guide anyone who walks this way. And ahead, the city waits with its remaining lamps and the final stages of your circuit, the work almost done, the night almost complete. The path from the northern ditch turns south and narrows as it re-enters the built streets, the grassy verges giving way to cobbles and the open sky shrinking once more between the walls of buildings that press in from either side. The transition is gradual, the space between structures growing smaller with each step until you are walking once again through a lane that has the enclosed feeling of the older districts, the walls on both sides close enough that you could touch them if you stretched out your arms. The cobbles here are small and dark, the sort of stones that were laid when the city was young, their surfaces worn to a dull shine that reflects the lamplight in scattered pinpoints like a broken mirror. This lane leads you back toward the center, but by a different route than the one you took on the way out, a loop that completes the circuit and ensures that no street is left in darkness. The buildings here are a mix of small workshops and modest dwellings, their ground floors used for trades that do not require the heavy materials of the potters or the brickmakers, trades like weaving and sewing and the carding of wool. The shutters on these workshops are closed and latched, but the signs that hang above the doors are still visible in the lamplight. Wooden boards painted with simple images that tell the illiterate what trade is practiced within. A shuttle for the weaver, a pair of shears for the cloth cutter, a skein of yarn for the spinner. One of these signs creaks faintly as you pass beneath it, a sound that comes from an iron hinge that needs oiling, and the creak is the only noise in the lane, apart from your own footsteps and the soft hiss of the flame at the end of your pole. The lane makes a shallow bend and then opens into a small yard that is set back from the street, a workspace that belongs to a weaver whose family has been in the trade for 3 generations. The yard is covered by a roof of timber beams and terracotta tiles, open on the street side but sheltered from the rain, and its floor is paved with large flat stones that have been smoothed by the passage of feet and the dragging of equipment. Against the back wall, facing the street so that it catches the daylight, stands the loom. The loom is a large vertical frame of oak, its uprights as thick as a man's arm, and its crossbeam a heavy baulk of timber that has been darkened by age and the oils of many hands. The warp threads stretch from the top beam to the bottom roller in a dense curtain of undyed wool, their colors ranging from pale cream through soft browns to a deep earthy gray, the natural shades of the fleece before any dye has been applied. The weft threads, the ones that run across, have been started about halfway up the warp, and the pattern that is emerging is a simple stripe, the kind of cloth that will become a winter tunic for someone of modest means. The shuffle hangs from a cord looped over the top beam, its wooden body shaped like a small boat, and its bobbin still holding a length of the brown weft thread. The whole loom stands silent and still, its work paused for the night, but there is something in its posture that suggests it is only resting, that it will be ready to continue as soon as the weaver returns in the morning. Beside the loom, mounted on a wooden bracket that is fixed to one of the roof supports, a single lamp burns. This is a lamp that you lit earlier in the evening on your outward journey, and it has been burning steadily for several hours, its oil now low and its flame beginning to shrink. The light it gives is soft and warm, and it falls on the woven cloth in a way that brings out the variations in the natural wool, the cream threads glowing golden, and the brown threads absorbing the light into their darker depths. The pattern of the stripe is just visible, a series of horizontal bands that will be broken by a wider cream panel before the next stripe begins, a design so simple that it has probably been woven on this same loom for decades without change. You set the basket down on the paved floor and approach the lamp, the pole resting easily in your hand. The oil in the lamp is low indeed, barely a thumb's depth remaining in the bottom of the reservoir, and you know that it will not last until morning. You look through the spent lamps in the basket and find one that still holds a good amount of oil, a lamp that you removed from a bracket near the forum, its wick trimmed and ready. You lift the old lamp from the bracket and set it in the basket, then hang the replacement in its place, adjusting the angle so that the light continues to fall on the loom and the woven cloth. The taper touches the wick and the flame catches, a fresh bright flame that is taller than the old one and throws a stronger light across the yard, illuminating the shuttle and the warp threads and the smooth wooden rollers at the top and bottom of the frame. While you were there, standing in the quiet of the weaver's yard, with the new lamp burning steadily, you become aware of the deep silence that has settled over the city. It is a different silence from the ones you have walked through earlier in the evening, a silence that is heavier and more complete, the silence of the middle hours of the night when even the dogs have stopped barking, and the birds are still roosting, and the last embers of the cooking fires have cooled to ash. The city is asleep now, truly asleep, and you are the only person moving through it, the only one awake among all the thousands who lie behind their shuttered windows and their painted doors. In that deep silence a single sound reaches you, a dog barking somewhere far away, perhaps near the eastern gate, or in the countryside beyond the wall. The bark comes once, a distant muffled note that hangs in the air for a moment and then fades, and it is followed by nothing, no answering bark, no human voice, just the silence closing back in like water over a dropped stone. The dog has barked and gone back to sleep, and you were left with the quiet and the loom and the steady flame of the new lamp. You look at the cloth on the loom once more, your eyes tracing the line of the stripe and the way the warp threads divide into two sets where the handlebar has lifted them, creating the shed through which the shuttle passes. The work is half done, the woven portion reaching about to the middle of the frame, and below that the warp threads hang loose and untwisted, waiting for the weaver's hands to continue the pattern. The cloth has a smell to it, the clean animal smell of wool that has been washed but not scoured of all its natural oils, a smell that is warm and alive even in the cold night air. It mixes with the oily scent of the lamp and the dry scent of the old timber and the faint dusty smell of the paved floor, creating a combination that is particular to this place and this hour. You leave the weaver's yard and return to the lane, the basket now heavier with the addition of the spent lamp and your pouch lighter because you have used up most of the spare oil in the bronze flask. The street ahead is straight and level, leading directly toward the western gate where you began, and as you walk you can see the lights that you have left behind you on the circuit, a gentle string of golden points that trace your path through the city. They are visible whenever you come to a gap between buildings or a cross street that aligns with the route you have taken, a chain of small suns that stretches back through the potter's lanes and the residential courts and the crossroads with its shrine and its old oak post, all the way to the riverfront where the granaries stand and the water moves in its slow dark channel. The lights are like a memory made visible, a record of the evening's work written in flame. The streets that you walk now are familiar, the final stretch of the circuit that you have walked hundreds of times before, and your feet know the way without any need for guidance from your eyes. You pass a corner where a stone water trough stands against a wall, its surface dry now, but its rim worn smooth by the noses of horses and oxen over many years of use. You pass a doorway that has a small mosaic set into its threshold, a pattern of black and white tiles that form a simple geometric design, the tiles slightly loose underfoot so that they click when you step on them. You pass a wall that has a deep crack running from top to bottom, a crack that has been there for as long as you can remember, and that has been filled with a different colored mortar that makes it look like a scar on the stone. All these small landmarks are part of the route, part of the mental map that you carry in your head, and they appear and disappear in the lamplight like old friends glimpsed briefly from the corner of your eye. The basket is heavier than it has been all night, loaded now with the spent lamps you have collected, and you shift it from one hand to the other as you walk, balancing the weight. The pole in your other hand has become an extension of your arm, its length and balance so familiar that you no longer notice it, and the flame at its tip continues to burn with the same steady light that it has held since you first lit it outside the chamber door. The flame has been your companion all evening, a small bright presence that has guided your hand and lit the wicks of more than 40 lamps, and it still has enough oil in its flax tuft to last the rest of the way. As you approach the western gate, the street widens, and the wall comes into view ahead, its grey stones dark against the sky, and the arch of the gate a deeper darkness within the stone. The lamp that you lit beside the gate at the very start of the circuit is still burning, its flame tall and steady in the sheltered angle of the wall, and seeing it is like coming home after a long journey, even though you have never left the city. The gate is closed for the night, its heavy wooden doors barred with an iron beam that would take 4 men to lift, and the small postern door beside it is also closed, the night watchman on the other side probably dozing on his stool. The only light at the gate is the lamp you lit, and the flame at the end of your pole, and they greet each other across the empty street like 2 old friends who have been waiting for this meeting. You walk the last few paces to the gate and set the basket down on the cobbles, your arms grateful for the release of the weight. The wall rises above you, its stones cool and silent, and the arch of the gate frames the darkness beyond, the road that leads out into the countryside and the forests and the distant towns of the interior. Inside the city, behind you, the lamps you have lit hold the streets in a low, warm glow that seems now like a living thing, a net of light that you have cast over the sleeping city and that will hold until the dawn comes to extinguish it. The night sky above is still clear, the stars still bright, and the faint breeze moves along the wall, touching your face with a coolness that is clean and refreshing. You pick up the pole and the basket and turn to the low doorway of the lighting chamber, the same door you came out of hours ago when the sky was still grey-blue and the first stars had not yet appeared. The door swings inward without a sound on its well-oiled hinges, and you step inside, leaving the night behind you for a while. The last bracket on the circuit is fixed to the inner face of the gate arch itself, a sturdy iron arm that is set into the stonework at a height just above your head, on the side opposite the lamp you lit when you first stepped out of the lighting room hours ago. That first lamp still burns, its flame steady and bright in the sheltered angle of the wall, and its light falls on the cobbles and the closed gate and the dark shape of the postern door. The matching bracket on the other side has been empty all this time, waiting for the final lamp of the evening, and now you stand before it with the basket heavy at your feet and the pole resting against your shoulder, the flame at its tip, a small patient companion that has not faltered once. You had no fresh lamps left in the basket, so a moment ago you ducked back into the lighting chamber and took one from the shelf. A lamp that the overseer had set aside as the last of the night. Its clay body a pale terracotta with a smooth unblemished surface and a wick that had been trimmed to a perfect length by someone else's hand earlier in the day. The overseer had looked up from his wax tablet when you entered, his stylus pausing in its slow journey across the marks, and he had watched you take the lamp from the shelf with the same calm expression he has worn all evening, his silence a quiet acknowledgment that the work is nearly complete. You had not spoken, only lifted the lamp in a small gesture of thanks, and then you had come back out into the cool air where the night waits. Now you hold that lamp in your left hand, feeling its familiar weight and the slight roughness of the clay against your palm. The cap is still on the filling hole, a small disc of fired terracotta with a tiny knob on top, and you remove it with a simple pinch of your thumb and forefinger, dropping it into the pouch at your hip, where it lands among the other caps and spare wicks and the small bronze flask that is now nearly empty. You shift the pole in your right hand so that the hook end comes forward, and you fit the iron curve through the lamp's loop handle, the metal sliding into place with the same soft scrape that you have heard dozens of times tonight, a sound so familiar that it has become a part of the rhythm of your breathing. Raising the lamp to the bracket is a motion that your body knows completely, the arms extending, the wrists adjusting, the pole angling upward until the lamp's loop settles over the iron hook with a gentle click that travels down the ash shaft and into your hands. You lower the pole just enough to release the weight, and the lamp remains on the bracket, hanging level with its spout pointing outward into the street, its body a pale shape against the dark stone of the arch. The gate tower rises above it, the masonry blocks ascending in even courses to the parapet where the sentries would stand if there were any sentries tonight, and the arch itself is a deep curve of shadow that frames the darkness beyond the wall like a picture frame around a painting of the void. You bring the taper end of the pole up to the wick, the small flame at its tip dancing slightly as it nears the lamp. The wick is pale and dry, its trimmed fibers a tiny brush of reed pith that seems to wait for the touch of fire with a patience that matches your own. When the flame meets the wick, the transformation happens as it always does. The brief hesitation, the small blue flicker at the tip, and then the warm golden flame that blooms outward and settles into its steady teardrop shape. A shape that you've watched come into being so many times that it feels like a part of your own self, a small sun that you have called forth from the clay and the oil and the wick. The light from this final lamp joins the light from its twin on the other side of the gate, and together they illuminate the whole area beneath the arch, the cobbles and the iron hinges of the great doors and the worn threshold stone that has been crossed by thousands of feet over the years. You step back, lowering the pole until its base rests on the cobbles, and you look up. The gate arch frames a rectangle of the deepest sky, a darkness that is not empty but filled with stars. The stars had been there all evening, emerging gradually as the dusk faded, but now they are fully present in a way that they were not earlier. Their numbers beyond counting, and their brightness sharpened by the cool, clear air of the middle night. The Milky Way stretches across the opening of the arch like a pale river of light, its edges soft and diffuse, its center a dense clustering of tiny points that seem to shimmer if you look at them indirectly. The constellations that you know by sight, the patterns that the sailors use and the farmers use and the old men who sit on the steps of the forum use, are all there in their appointed places, their shapes traced by the brighter stars against the fainter background of the infinite. The arch frames this celestial display as though the builders of the gate had intended it to be a window onto the heavens, a stone frame around a picture that changes with the seasons and the hours, but is always beautiful in its own way. Beyond the gate, the darkness of the open countryside stretches away toward the distant hills, and you can see the faint line of the road that leads out of the city and into the forests and the scattered farmsteads of the interior. There are no lights out there, no lamps or fires or candle-lit windows, only the starlight falling on the fields and the trees and the slow-moving river that curves away to the south. The darkness beyond the wall is a different kind of darkness from the darkness within, not the comfortable shadow of familiar streets, but the wide and empty night of the wild. And the gate stands as the boundary between the two, a threshold that you cross only in your mind as you stand here with the lamps burning behind you and the stars burning above. You turn around your back to the gate now, and you look at the city. The lamps you have lit are spread before you like a constellation brought down to earth, a network of warm golden points that mark the streets and the lanes and the open spaces, each one a small beacon that you placed with your own hands over the course of the evening. The nearest lights are the ones along the wall, a chain of flames that stretches to the left and right along the inside base of the stonework, each one a few dozen paces from the next, their circles of light overlapping slightly to create a continuous band of illumination. Beyond them, the lights of the forum are visible as a softer glow that rises above the roof lines, the tall lamps on the basilica steps burning brightly and the portico lamps casting their light across the empty square. Further still, the lights of the potters' lanes and the residential courts are scattered like seeds, their positions marked by the faint warm radiance that spills from the narrow alleys and the closed courtyards, and at the very limit of your sight, the lamps along the riverfront are a distant string of gold that traces the edge of the dark water. The city is held in this net of light, a net that you have cast over the streets and the buildings and the sleeping people within them, a net that will hold until the dawn comes and the morning lamp tender makes his rounds to extinguish each flame and refill each reservoir for the night to come. The thought of this is not a proud thought, not a thought that swells in your chest or demands acknowledgement, but simply a quiet fact, a part of the natural order of things, like the rising of the moon or the turning of the tide. You have done what you came to do, and the city is the better for it, and that is enough. You stand there for a little while, the pole in your hand and the empty basket at your feet, and you let the silence of the night settle around you like a cloak. The air is cool and still, carrying the faint scents of the city, the dry stone and the lamp oil and the distant memory of the river, and the stars overhead continue their slow wheel across the sky, the same wheel that they have turned for all the ages of the world. The gate arch frames the darkness behind you, and the lamps frame the city before you, and you are the point between them, the still center of a quiet world. After a time you pick up the basket, which is now heavy with the spent lamps you have collected, and you turn back to the low door of the lighting chamber. The door swings inward on its silent hinges, and you step inside, ducking under the lintel, the warmth of the interior air wrapping around you after the coolness of the street. The chamber is lit by the single wall lamp that has been burning since you arrived, its flame still tall and steady, and the overseer sits on his stool in the corner with the wax tablet resting on his knee. He looks up as you enter, and his eyes go to the basket in your hand and the pole in your other hand, and he gives a small nod that carries the weight of a longer conversation, a nod that says the work is done and done well. You cross to the workbench and set the basket down on the oak planks, the spent lamps shifting inside with a muffled clink of clay against clay. Then you attend to the pole, which has served you all evening with its ash shaft and its iron fittings and its faithful taper. The flame at the tip of the taper is still burning, the flax tuft now nearly consumed, its oil almost gone after the long circuit of the city. You take the small brass snuffer from your belt, the same snuffer you used on the clogged wick in the residential lane, and you place it over the taper's flame, holding it there until the flame dies with a soft sigh and a thin curl of smoke that rises and disappears. The pole you return to its corner, leaning it against the wall with the hook facing inward and the taper resting against the stone, exactly where it was when you took it down at the start of the evening. The position of the pole is a small thing, but it matters, because in the lighting chamber everything has its place, and everything is returned to its place when the work is finished. The spent lamps you unload from the basket one by one, setting them on the workbench in a neat row. Each lamp is warm to the touch, its clay body holding the memory of the flame that burned within it, and each one has a different pattern of soot around its spout, a pattern that tells a small story of how it burned and where it hung and how the air moved around it. You place them in the order that you will clean them later, or that the morning tender will clean them, the lamps with the most soot first and the cleanest ones last, a system that has no name but that everyone follows because it is the sensible way to do it. The basket you return to its hook on the wall, the woven willow now empty and light, its rope handles draped over the wooden peg. You look around the chamber, checking that everything is in order. The bronze pouring vessel is on its shelf, the spare wicks are in their flax bundle, the caps are in the clay dish, and the small bronze knife is in its leather sheath. The oil storage jar stands in its wooden stand with the fitted lid in place, and the high window shows the same rectangle of dark sky that it showed when you arrived, the stars visible through the narrow slit. The chamber is tidy and quiet and ready for the next night, and you feel the satisfaction of this order settling into your mind, a satisfaction that is not loud or demanding, but simply present, like the warmth of the wall lamp on the stone walls. The overseer has finished his tally marks. You can see the wax tablet from where you stand, its surface covered with the neat rows of his notation, each mark representing a lamp that was checked or replaced or lit, a complete record of the evening's work, compressed into a series of small lines and dots that only he can read with any fluency. He sets the stylus down on the tablet with a soft click and stretches his fingers, the same gesture you saw him make at the start of the evening, and then he looks at the tablet for a long moment, checking the tally against some mental list that he carries in his head. When he is satisfied, he places the tablet on the small shelf beside his stool, the shelf that holds the spare styluses and the pot of wax for repairs, and he folds his hands in his lap with the air of a man whose work is also done. You cross to the stone bench that stands against the wall near the door, a simple slab of grey stone supported on two low blocks, its surface worn smooth by the generations of lamplighters who have sat there before you. You sit down, feeling the coolness of the stone through the fabric of your tunic, and you let your hands rest on your knees, the palms open and relaxed after hours of gripping the pole and the basket. The bench is not particularly comfortable, but it is familiar, and the act of sitting on it at the end of a circuit is a ritual that you have performed so many times that your body expects it now, the muscles of your legs and back releasing a tension that you had not even noticed until it began to ease. The cool night air comes through the high window, and it touches your face with a gentleness that feels like a kindness. You close your eyes for a moment, not because you are tired, but because the darkness behind your eyelids is restful, and the sounds of the chamber are soft and steady, the faint hiss of the wall lamp, and the slow breathing of the overseer, and the distant, almost inaudible murmur of the city that is asleep beyond the door. When you open your eyes again, the chamber is the same, the lamp burning, the tools in their places, the wax tablet on its shelf, and you feel a quiet sense of completion that has no words attached to it, a feeling that is simply there, as much a part of the night as the stars and the silence and the chain of flames you have left behind you in the streets. After a little while you stand up, the stone bench releasing you with the same cool indifference with which it received you. The overseer gives you a final nod, a nod that means good night and see you tomorrow, and the lamps will be waiting, all of it contained in a single small movement of his grey head. You return the nod and cross to the door, pushing it open and stepping out into the street for the last time tonight. The lamps by the gate burn on either side of the arch, their flames tall and steady, and the street before you is lit by the chain of lights that you have placed along it, a path of warm gold that leads through the quiet city and all the way to your own door. You turn toward home, your sandals making their soft sound on the cobbles, and you walk slowly through the lamplit streets that you know so well, the night cool and still around you and the stars continuing their long journey across the sky.